Good morning, Avalon. Welcome back to Saxon Math, Algebra 1. Today we'll do Lesson 60. Lesson 60 is mostly review, talking about three-dimensional geometric figures, or solids. When we talk about a solid, we're talking about three-dimensional shapes. Not two-dimensional like a triangle or a square, not one-dimensional like a line, but three-dimensional. Things that have length, width, and height. So a cube, a sphere, all of these are solids. We'll be focusing, like we have been, mostly on prisms, which is a specific kind of solid where we've got two sides that are flat and are parallel to each other. It doesn't matter what shape those sides are, but if there are two of them and they're parallel to each other, then we've got a prism. So you notice on the board I've got there a cylinder which has a circle on the bottom and a circle on the top. Those two are parallel to each other, so it's a prism. And then again, a triangular prism here with a triangle on the front and a triangle on the back, which are also parallel to each other. We've got another prism. So anytime we talk about a prism, that's the kind of shape we're dealing with. It's important to keep straight the terminology for the different parts of prisms because some of it can be tricky. The trickiest one, I think, is the base. When you hear the word base, you think bottom. That's not necessarily the case, though, because we could take our prism and we could rotate it around anyway, and that's not going to change its size or shape or anything, just the way that we're looking at it. So the way to find the base that I recommend is ask yourself, does this have any sides that are not rectangles? And if there are any that are not rectangles, there's your base. So if we look at this cylinder, it's got a circle on the bottom and a circle on the top. Okay, those are circles, not rectangles, so there's the base. Similarly, the triangular prism there, the triangle on the front and the triangle on the back, those are our bases, not that flat rectangular side that it's sitting on. So if you have any sides that are not rectangles, there's your base. It's going to be very important that you get your base correct in order to be able to figure out anything else about the prism. Another term that we're going to introduce today for another part of the prism is lateral edge. Lateral from the Latin word latus, meaning side. The side edge. This is not where the sides meet the base, but this is where the sides meet each other. So this edge here on this triangular prism, or this edge here on this cylinder, are lateral edges where the sides meet each other. When we talk about the height or the altitude of a prism, that's the length of that lateral edge. It's the distance between our two bases. So again, be careful. Height, altitude sound like they mean up and down. Not necessarily, because we could take our prism and we could turn it sideways. The height is still the same. So here with this triangular prism, the altitude or the height is actually the front to back distance, the distance between those two sides. Okay, formulas for prisms. We've had two of them. We're still going to keep using the same two. Please make sure you get them straight. Make sure you know them, especially the second one. The first one, which is a bit easier, is for volume. The area of the base, of one of the bases, times the height. Again, really important that you get your base correct and you get your height correct. Otherwise, your volume's not going to be right. So figure out what your base is. To figure out the area of that is going to depend on what kind of shape it is. So if it's a circle, you'll use pi r squared. If it's a triangle, 1/2 base times height, or whatever, depending on the shape of it. And take that and multiply it by the height or the lateral edge of the prism. The other formula that everybody hates is the surface area formula. When we talk about surface area, we're not talking about how much space is in it, that's the volume. We're talking about all the sides, the surface of the whole thing. The surface area. How much paint would I need to cover this whole thing on the outside? And so we could have a lot of sides on one of these prisms. You know, with a cube, we've got 6 sides. With this cylinder, in a sense, we've only got 3 because it's just one smooth side that goes all the way around between those two bases. The triangular prism there has 5 sides. So how do we find the surface area? Well, the first part is the easy part. The base is, there's always going to be 2 bases, and we can always find the area of those. There's something flat, we can find the area of it. And so once we find that, multiply that by 2. Great, now we've got the base and the other base opposite it. What about those other sides? This one, you've seen me use this illustration before. I like to think of this using a folded up piece of paper like this. So with our triangular prism, continue to use that same example, if we're figuring out the area of all the sides, okay, we've already figured out the two bases, the front and the back, but what about these guys? What about this side and this side and this side? One thing we could do is we could find the measurements of each one, multiply, and then add them together. But there's an easier way. If we think of this as 3 separate rectangles, it's a little more difficult than if we just unfold it and think of it as one larger rectangle. Now with this one larger rectangle, length times width is the area of it, where do we get the length and the width from? Well, the length, this measurement here, that's our altitude or our lateral edge. It's the distance between those two bases. That'll give us the height of this rectangle. The width is the distance around one of these bases. Right? Notice the width of this, the long axis of it, in my prism is these three sides of the triangle. So that's going to be the perimeter of the base, this one here, times the height of the prism, or your altitude, or your lateral edge, whatever you want to call it. And we add those two together, the two bases, and then the perimeter of the base times the height for the sides, and that'll give us the whole surface area. In this lesson, we're also introducing the term lateral surface area. Lateral, again, meaning related to the side. So what is the surface area of just the sides without those bases? Well, it's the same formula as here, except we don't add in the bases. So just that second part of it, the perimeter of the base times the height. Please, if you have any questions, come to the virtual office hours, shoot me an email. You know how to get in touch with me. Otherwise, please do the evens for this lesson set, and I'll talk to you guys soon.